incredibly busy week in the world of Montecito. Oh yes, without a shadow of a doubt. And as many people realise when we look back on these very special bi-royal appointments, it's always good to look in greater detail. You see, when you think about it, as I've often said here on the show, the problem that you have is that you can't fix unpopularity. And one of the biggest problems really that Prince Harry has got is the fact that, and people like to say this a lot to me in the comments, why do you give Prince Harry an easy ride? What I'm saying is he was very popular, and to lose that popularity is incredible in itself. The reason and how he lost the popularity, some people might suggest, is by teaming up and getting married. Now, Meghan's sort of backlash on that is the fact that she was a person who married a prince and took him away to America, and that's the reason why people dislike her. It's hard to believe that that's truly the one-off narrative, isn't it, because it's what they did in the in-between. If they'd have gone off like they first said, of course, and said, well, we're going off to save elephants in Africa or do something worthy, or in fact, as Her Majesty the Queen nicely offered, to be ambassadors for the Commonwealth, but that wasn't really big enough, good enough. Meghan's seething jealousy of Catherine, the Princess of Wales, is very, very hard to contain. And you can sense that literally every time Catherine pops up at something like, Troop in the Colour or the Regalia or whatever, Wimbledon. Meghan has to find a way of reminding you, the great public, the world's public, that she's there too. And that was part of a problem. She could never really be behind Catherine. Hated the idea of bowing or curtsying, in fact found that incredibly funny. And I think that again is part and parcel of the problem why the public dislike her so much on a great level. Now what's fascinating I find is that Prince Harry cannot believe, and this is from an excellent source, that his popularity has sunk to such an equally bad level. And according to this, he doesn't understand why his uncle, Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, why he's labelled in the same bucket as him. Because when you think about it, Harry had such popularity, he could have done so much with it. But naturally he blames the British media and claims that it's the media that have turned the public against him. Forgetting, of course, that people are fed up to the back teeth of him demanding security, being paid for by us, but meanwhile saying that he much prefers to live over in the United States because that's where his home is now. You see, the trouble is when you're an entitled prince, you truly think you can have it all. And what he's now finding out is that he simply can't. But as this week's really developed and turned into something of what should have been a positive week for Harry, where he recreated the steps of his late mother, Princess Diana, the Princess of Wales, well, that was supposed to turn things around. What truly happened was it turned it round on a mega bad scale. And once again, all the negative PR of him literally dining out on his mother's memory. Now, of course, Prince William, the Prince of Wales, has never done anything like that. People say, oh yes, but he turned up, Neil, and he did the homeless charity and all of that sort of stuff. But really, that's his job. What is Harry's job? And that's the problem. Now, donning the sort of flat press jacket thing again and recreating her walk, literally for the cameras, as I told you, was fascinating on two levels. He banned all British media, yet it doesn't matter what you ban, every agency in the world sells the picture, sells the story. So it's always going to get into the British media, but he doesn't want the British media anywhere near him. And then consequently, as I also pointed out, he had his own production team, his own videographer, with the idea of turning this and that particular stunt once again back into some kind of documentary. Now, whether that be still for Netflix, if they're still employed by Netflix at that time, remains to be seen. But there's now a big thorn in the side of Meghan and Harry's marriage. And it's one really that when you think about it, you couldn't have basically said, well, this really wasn't going to work out too well. Time and time again, Meghan and Harry have a brand new plan to relaunch themselves, reevaluate themselves, and make themselves once again popular. It's your fault why Meghan and Harry and her show, as ever, etc., are simply not popular. Now, this is where this gets interesting for me, because now, apparently, according to a very well-placed source, the woman who came over here to London to try and do something, well, apparently, sort something out with, in fact, His Majesty the King's personal communications officer, well, things are getting a little bit frosty between the two. And here's why. Right now, chums, over in Montecito, people are telling me it's absolute madness. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense, because time and time again, you've got a whole brand new team and then the remnants of another team. And the other team know exactly why the other team got fired, left, removed, whatever you want to call it. The thing that you learn in this job, and we've all been there, haven't we, is the fact that, of course, the old team can tip off the new team about how bad things are. But the bigger issue for the new team, I've been told, is simply this. You see, the situation is nobody truly knows what they're doing, because time and time again, things are changed, moved around and, reevaluated at the drop of a hat. You see, Meghan, as I've said, is very, very fickle. And, creative people can be like that. But Meghan herself is not a creative person. She's a former actress reading lines that somebody else has written, who look good in all those Armani pencil skirts and stuff like that. But that was the job, It's not very difficult. And remember, scenes are less than 30 or 40 seconds. If you can't memorize those lines, then you have a problem. Part of the problem that Netflix had when they were making their big series with Meghan was the fact that she's not a natural, sort of ad-libber, a conversationalist. Harry is even worse, according to the source. He's polite and sweet and kind, but not really any in-depth conversation. Hence the reason they decided very quickly to keep him out of anything to do with conversation in his Netflix show Polo, right? That's truly the deal. As for Meghan, you see, now what the problem is with her, the staff, as I say, that are now based in her empire out in Montecito, they've got to decide, well, what do they do? What is their role? And there's another problem emerging behind that, because there's layers of people. Now, their new head of communications, Meredith Maines, it sounds like a name, doesn't it, from one of those sort of Dynasty Dallas soap operas, where she comes storming through the door like Joan Collins, all lip gloss and, of course, Aaron Spelling style. The problem that you have is this is a real person. Now, Meredith, as I've said, comes from a sort of entertainment background, very quick to help push and promote The Crown, the TV series, amongst other stuff. And, having worked with many Merediths in my time, I can see that they don't like to take no for an answer. But there's already a frisson of problems now between Meredith and, again, allegedly, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. You see, what started off as well, and there's always the great picture, isn't there, of them all grinning together, all getting on very well, well, that very quickly turns to something like the Joker from Batman. They smile, but not with their eyes, And the problem that you have is that Meredith wants her own way. Nothing wrong with that, that's what publicists do. But you see, behind the scenes, there's another person that wants her own way. And the woman who's paying the bills always gets her own way. Now, she's not paying the bills because Prince Harry's paying the bills, right? But Meredith, and it was her idea, that Prince Harry should sit in front of the BBC TV cameras to talk about his security battle. This was the one where, allegedly, she encouraged him to talk on camera about how His Majesty the King could have made all of this go away. And in fact, the establishment, well, they wanted to make it difficult for him. Literally listening to the rantings of, some people might say, an unstable mind. You see, Harry, as we know, is a very big fan of therapy. And what he decided to do was to sit down in front of those BBC TV cameras and really speak therapy speak. But buoyed on by Meredith Maines, well, the problem was that this was another backlash. And this really was a huge, huge backlash. Now, of course, Harry can never take accountability for this particular disaster. It's never going to be his fault. And very quickly, Harry pointed out to his boss, Meghan, right, that he was unhappy with it. After all, he'd done everything she said. Why were they attacking him? As you know, the BBC also had to put out an apology because they did not inform the palace in the first place. They never asked if they'd like an opinion about what Harry was saying. They rolled it out. That's how little respect the BBC have for our monarchy. And when you think about what's gone on, say, with the likes of MasterChef and the recent Glastonbury disaster, not forgetting, of course, the shambles of Hugh Edwards, you could understand that they may want to try and retrieve some level of, well, niceness. But no, this is the new BBC. But back to Meghan, Harry and Meredith. Well, you see, according to that source, Harry's now found it a little bit chilly to deal with Meredith and her ideas. But she had other ideas up her sleeve alongside the new team that have been brought in. And this is one that's creating a big wedge between all of them. I think you know what I'm going to be mentioning. And this is one, apparently, that she thought was a terrific idea. When Meghan Markle let the world see that she was in fact still using the HRH title, of course she was delighted. I mean, whatever people think. And the idea really was that, the public apparently, whenever she's out and about, which is odd because we don't really see her out and about, do we? It's always contrived and very much, the sort of thing where ultimately, if you want to get near Meghan, you've got to get through the security. As we saw earlier this year when she was in Canada for the 4 days of the Invictus Games, everything was, curated. Every picture put out was made sure that she signed it off. She didn't want any of those embarrassing sweat stains that she had, for instance, in Colombia. She had to have full control. So make no mistake, chums, that those pictures of Meghan with her HRH card just sending out to private friends and stuff, that was, it's just what she did. I mean, why would you send that out to a friend if they know you as the Duchess of Sussex? And let's be honest, how many people actually came into her kitchen, the fake kitchen for Netflix, and addressed her as Her Royal Highness the Duchess Meghan? I mean, it's ridiculous. It was a setup, it was put together, and it was there to create absolute havoc. Now you can imagine who came up with that, right? This whole new team. They just want to keep Meghan back in the limelight, talking about her for all the right reasons, the sort of thing. Now, here's where this gets really interesting, as I often say, again, for me, because as we now know with this new team behind Meghan, what they're hoping to do, and the ideal thing was to try and fuse the sort of breakdown of relationships between the royal family and Meghan. Now, Prince Harry, as we know, has famously said that he's not returning back here to the United Kingdom because he doesn't feel it's safe for her, and more importantly, he couldn't bring his children. Well, nobody's going to miss them anyway, because it would take Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Machine to find out exactly where those children are and if they're the same children in every picture. They change hair colour, size, you name it. Nobody really knows. And they love that. Absolutely, they love the mystery regarding the children. If they wanted to actually clear that total mystery up, and the fact that apparently Meghan was hurt and upset when she put out her twerking video, if you remember, because people were speculating as to exactly, was she pregnant, wasn't she pregnant? And this was all the conspiracy theories that have involved across, of course, the internet for a long time. Well, it'd be quite simple, wouldn't it? Just put up, the register, the birth, the details, the hospital, the weight. Yeah, if you really want to draw a line under it, that's what you do. Because, of course, when a royal baby is born, that's part and parcel of the deal. The easel, the mother, what time, the weight, everybody's doing fine. But they've kept that in the dark for years because they know that that creates some sort of controversy, that people will talk about them. The next controversy was, of course, the fact that literally Meghan decided to release that now infamous video of her alongside Prince Harry dancing away, apparently to try and ease the pain of the imminent birth of Lily, which of course then we found out was going to be called Lilibet. And if you remember, Meghan also slipped up on the podcast by saying, if you've got an idea for a name, don't tell anybody, just surprise them. Boy, she surprised the Queen, didn't she? Because of course the Queen, whether you believe it or not, never gave permission, and it was never ever discussed. If you remember at the time also, Prince Harry said that he was going to sue the BBC because of course they claimed that he hadn't had permission. That all went to nothing. As ever with Meghan and Harry, there's a lot of hot air, it disappears to nothing, and suddenly that becomes the story, right? But this video in itself was again another idea that apparently the new cheese on the block, along with the disruptors, Meredith Meghan, thought was great, because this humanised Meghan. I know, is that possible? But the thing is, she felt, well, all mums will relate to this. Because of course, correct me if I'm wrong, chums, but if you've had children, it's the first thing you do, isn't it? Videoing a dance in the delivery room and knowing it off by heart and all the moves and all that sort of stuff. Now, a lot of people said, who filmed the video? Well, it was on a stand. And this was apparently going to be just a private thing forever between Harry and Meghan. And many people suggest this is exactly where Harry's got it wrong. Because if he ever felt that this was ever going to remain private, well then another huge mistake. You see, if you remember, both Meghan and Harry insisted that they didn't want their children out in the world of social media. But again, Meghan decided to wait until Harry was halfway around the world in Canada to let the world once again see her children on social media. Already citing this, though, as a big problem as to why she had to quit the monarchy. The backlash, though, of the twerking video has been incredible, because while it was said that it got 42 million views, the backlash in publicity was even worse. None more so from the fact that Netflix were a little bit peeved, to say the least, because they felt she could have done that at the time of her imminent cooking show with Ever As Loved Meghan. And then, according to a very close source, this drove a very, very strong wedge between Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle. So much so that there was very much a clause when he recently went over to Angola that nobody ever suggested asking him a question regarding this video. He feels very, very touchy about it, and rightly so. The background story is that, well, that's not him, that's all about Meghan, and if you want to ask, you can ask her. Remember, she's already put this into the public domain by saying on the podcast, oh, so you saw the video. And as I said, a complete setup with Emma Gurdy anyway. Of course he'd seen the video, they'd agreed in advance, and everybody was allowed to know exactly what Meghan's response would be and what Emma's question would be. The one person that was truly hurt, according to the very well-placed source, is none other than her husband, Prince Harry. So consequently, by calling him a fox and very handsome, didn't placate him. The red-headed gene literally turned. And it was something that Meghan herself had never really seen before. The first in many, shall we say, blistering arguments behind the scenes. So where do they go from here? The problems now facing Harry and Meghan is not just the fact that there obviously are tensions inside the marriage. There has to be, because the scrutiny that they are basically under on a daily basis, all brought on by themselves. Make no mistake, chums, it's all their fault. You know, people like to think, oh no, but they've spun so many lies and deceit and things like that. Truly, people have no idea where they are, and particularly if you're trying to sell a brand. And that's really what Meghan and Harry tried to do. If you remember earlier this year, Meghan thought she got the piece de resistance by sitting down in Gwyneth Paltrow's kitchen. Remember that? And that really truly backfired on Gwyneth Paltrow, because seemingly that phrase Markle popped up again. Now, when Meghan also recently released the wines, you know, these, I think 3 bottles, it was a lot of money. I'm not sure if it's like £120 in English money, but nonetheless, a lot of money. Well, the problem that you have with that is simply this. You see, as Meghan thought with the jam, with the sort of sprinkles, the flowers, and the other paraphernalia, the tea bags, and now the wine, at this particular point, 3-4 months down the line, they would expect big brands to come on board. I mentioned this to you before, the likes, of course, of Harvey Nicks, something like, you know, Macy's perhaps, Harrods, Fortnum & Mason's, all of those big stores that may wish to stock your particular brand. Now, there's 2 things that are interesting. So far, and again I have to say allegedly, but behind the scenes, it appears that the brand of, as ever, Meghan, Netflix, they're reluctant to disclose to the potential interest people exactly how many they've sold, the market rate, and how long are people waiting, and is there a desire to buy into this brand. Again, I have to say allegedly, but from an excellent source. And what really happens, and I've done this myself because I've sold into big companies, the thing is you have to prove to them that you've reached this pinnacle without any mass marketing. So for instance, if you took the As Ever wine to Fortnum & Mason's, they may agree to prominently display it, for instance, in their catalogue as you walk in their winery area, and perhaps you may agree to things like doing an in-store promotion, sampling night, that sort of stuff. That's how you get the deal. You see, Meghan, as I've told you before, time and time again, gets bored very quickly. She liked the idea of all of that, and I'm not so sure about the big brands over here in the United Kingdom because, well, it wouldn't be safe for her to travel with the wine, would it? No, she wouldn't be able to come back and do that. And also she turned down wonderful opportunities to actually promote the brand on daytime TV shows like This Morning and the BBC. You see, that goes against the people as well. If you turn down that wonderful opportunity to, help sell the brand, I mean, what did she do to get people to watch as ever? She popped up on Drew Barrymore, promptly announced to the world that she'd changed her name to Meghan Sussex, completely overriding the reason why she was there. It was to sell the TV show. The media picked up on the fact that she's now got a brand new name and wiped away the goodwill, if you like, of what the Drew Barrymore show was about. For me personally, I found it quite amusing to see that Drew Barrymore, even though she brought out that wonderful, delightful picture of herself being very young, meeting Harry's mother, Meghan, as best as she could, kept those veneers smiling. But really, she did not want to be upstaged by Princess Diana. And the sad thing was, Drew wasn't having it. This, as she said, was a delightful moment in her life, one she would never forget. So perhaps that's the reason why she decided to announce the fact that Meghan Sussex had arrived. Now, moving forward, where this goes even deeper is the fact that Netflix are very reluctant to get involved with the push and the pull of marketing, seemingly because there are other brands that they can do very well with. When you think about all the paraphernalia that you can buy attached to Bridgerton and the fact that there is a potential musical in the works, all sorts of stuff like that. Now, interestingly, the only area where Netflix are very keen to focus on is that they would like to keep Harry and Meghan on, remember you're hearing this first, as perhaps advisors for a couple of forthcoming Royal Associated shows. And I mentioned one of them a couple of days ago, literally about Queen Mary. You see, even if they didn't offer anything to the party, you could actually say, well, special advisors, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, it might sell. It's a bit like being executive producers. We know they don't do anything, but apparently this was really going to sell the brand. It hasn't worked on their individual projects. And as I said, the problem now that you've got for Meghan is no major brands are coming forward to say, yes, we want to take all of that. That's a worrying sign behind the scenes. The one thing that everybody would like to see, and this is the point of the secret meeting, and more importantly to try and procure more funds for the future, is that if they could see a bit of thawing, a bit of warmth between Meghan, Harry and the British monarchy, they feel that this will appease the brand and the public. Meghan's not this nasty person that people can't get on with, that fires staff willy-nilly. She's actually a good person. The ultimate goal, according to a meeting who was in there alongside Meredith Mayne, was the fact that even a letter back from Catherine, the Princess of Wales, wishing Meghan all the best with her endeavours, would be enough. But remember, when Meghan wrote her letter to her father, she wrote it with a view that, well, that could end up in the public domain. Of course, these ideas are all, poppycock. They're never going to happen. William and Catherine have wiped their hands of Prince Harry. It's a sad shame, but it's a reality. And as for Meghan now, with brands not coming forward, even the idea of selling the clothes that she wore and things that she liked on social media haven't taken off. Now, as ever, the people behind her, the brand new team, are telling her it's not her fault. Meredith Mayne said it's just a matter of time before the public turn around. They have turned around, they've switched off and decided that they don't want to watch. But there's a lot of money at stake. Meredith Mayne and the brand new team are on big, big salaries. And that money is coming from somewhere, but it can't continue forever. And even Meghan Markle in her darkest hours knows her dream of becoming a billionaire in 2025 is surely etching further and further away. But still, in moments of reality, she thinks a pot of jam and a wine range will simply turn it all around. As for Prince Harry, he's decided, well, he's not too bothered about that and wants to focus on charity. But the other problem that he has is, well, the thorny problem of did he pay the witnesses on his recent trial? And that's about to explode. As ever, thank you so much for joining me on the latest episode of By Royal Appointment. And as ever, chums, if you can, please like, share and comment respectfully. And let me know what you think to a few of these bombshells in today's latest episodes. As ever, until next time, take care of yourselves.